pressing the intro button.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome into another episode of the Triple Play Fantasy Football Show, a proud member of Fantasy Points and the Fantasy Points Media Group. Reminder, if you use code TriplePlay22, you'll get access to all the great tools over at fantasypoints.com. 10% off with our code. But what do you get when you go over there? Well, just this week, you can check out Graham Barfield's Best Ball Tiers, which were just released for all the positions. They will also be releasing their Franchise Focus Series that begins on Friday, which is June 24th. It's going to be a ton of great content in there. It's going to be 32 days, 32 articles, 32 podcasts, tons of amazing content that I could just spend the entire podcast telling you guys about. So I won't do that, but I promise you it's amazing stuff.
We need to talk about best ball because you just draft.
Are you interrupting me in the middle of this, Doc?
Yes.
Stop.
Yes.
I didn't even hear David give the code yet.
Tom Broly's betting preview is also going up. If you like college football and that's more your thing, college football package is live and it covers Devy, DFS betting, and CFF leagues. And Devy League's pre-draft primer show with Wes Huber is already on the YouTube channel. You can check that out. More stuff is even coming over the next few weeks, guys, that I'm not allowed to tell you yet. So just please make sure you go head over to Fantasy Points and fantasypoints.com for all the great stuff over there. D. Mendy here, back with you guys for another episode. We're continuing our division series here, joined by the whole crew this week, Johnny, Brad, and Doc. Johnny, welcome back to the show. Your presence was missed last week. Are you feeling rearing to go?
I don't want to point fingers, but my computer was working at the normal start time, and we pushed it back, and then it had to update itself, which is where it ran into some issues. I just got to say.
Feels like a low-key diss to me. I don't like it.
I'm not pointing fingers, but, I'm just laying out facts.
You guys are getting a peek behind the curtain of our group chat and all that went down last week, but it's all good. You guys know we always carry the torch here for anybody that can't make it, but when we have all four of us, it's even better. Brad and Doc, you guys are also here. You guys ready to talk some AFC South?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was going to interrupt you by just saying the beauty of best ball is you just draft and you forget about it.
Did you actually say the promo code, Dave?
I did.
I don't know if he did.
I don't think
Johnny
he did
says that every week, but I do say it in the
I don't think you did this time.
You didn't.
I did.
Say the promo code, Dave.
You will listen to it back, but I will say it again for those that did not hear me the first time. It's Triple Play 22, and that will give you a 10% discount to all the stuff over at Fantasy.
Oh, because it's 2022. Okay.
That's right. And they change the code up every year, so that way people don't just assume it's the same code every year. So they're very smart people, or smarter than I am. So without further ado, let's get into why we're here today. Let's talk about the AFC South and our preview for, of course, fantasy-wise, what we think about this division. We'll talk about rookies and their fantasy impact potentially this year, but also just fantasy relevant players from every one of these four teams. I'd like to kick things off with the Jacksonville Jaguars here, Brad. They just obviously had a high pick in this year's draft, the number 1 pick, and they had a bunch of draft picks. Is there anybody fantasy relevant from this draft that we should know about?
Honestly, no. The Jags did most of their damage in free agency for people that are actually going to be relevant to fantasy. But Snoop Connor is probably the only interesting rookie for fantasy purposes, and he's only interesting for dynasty, not redraft. Snoop was drafted in the 5th round of this year's draft. He's 5'10", 220 pounds out of Ole Miss. He's not exceptionally fast. He runs a 4.6 40, which is 50th percentile in his class. He doesn't have exceptional burst, but he does have a lot of power. He bench pressed the 225 25 times at the combine, which is 86th percentile for his position. We talked to that University of Minnesota assistant coach in the running back room there, And
Andy
he was
Ann.
talking about how, yeah, exactly. And he talked about how, broken tackles is a big metric, and they look at that for their running back projections. And, he's definitely got that potential to break a lot of tackles in the league. He's currently 4th on the depth chart, but James Robinson's going to miss time rehabbing his injury. And if he beats out Raquel Armstead, he's got the lane for the second string. So he had 13 touchdowns last year at Ole Miss, and he could be a great source for goal line carries. So he's worthy of a late round dynasty stash, but I wouldn't worry about him for a redraft.
Raquel Armstead, a former Brad Stradamus favorite.
I know.
Now you're stumping him to the curb here. He's officially. Are you out on him completely, Brad?
You gotta strike while the iron's hot. He didn't strike, so I'm pretty much out on him.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk about the Houston Texans, Doc, and any rookies that they brought in. There's a couple I think that we should be able to talk about here.
Yeah, so first rookie is John Mechie, and we all know him from the torn ACL in the SEC championship game. And I think they took him as an investment. I mean, let's be real. The Texans aren't going to be contending this year. I think trading away Deshaun Watson for the Hall of Picks is kind of karma for what they traded it for, Laramie Tunsil. But they're hoping that Mechie can be their wide receiver 2, maybe even wide receiver 1 in the future. He's a good route runner, good catch radius. I think they ease him in this year. The second was they took Dameon Pierce in the 4th round. And once again, I think that's the future running back for them. Marlon Mack is on a cheap 1-year deal. Rex Burkhead's going to be 32 by the time the season starts. And he had 329 career carries in college. Now, just to put that in context, Jonathan Taylor had 320 carries his junior year alone. So someone that's been used sparingly. And then the last is Tegan Quintintano, tight end out of Oregon State.
Quentin Tarantino.
He's
wow, what a reference.
I think they trot him out. Anytime they say that somebody's a former basketball player, I feel like that shoots up their stock a little bit. But he's 6'5", 258, good size. Jordan Akins is gone. He's a blocker. So that might be somebody we do for obscure tight end touchdown of the week, but I don't think fantasy relevant.
That's fair. Now, let me ask you guys, do you find his lack of touches in college concerning? Because, hey, why has he not gotten more work in college? Or do you find it more appealing in the sense that there's not as much wear and tear on his tires, especially the physicality that Dameon Pierce has? If you look at his runs, he's like a Marshawn Lynch ferocious type of runner. So what do you guys think?
I'm surprised Eric, scared of injuries, Mendelson didn't put that as a plus instead of a minus.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
I mean, not for players this young, though.
They said there was a notification from Sleeper today that said they would not be shocked to see him be the lead back by the end of the season. There were many that thought he could be the lead back by week 1. So that report I was like, okay, that more is kind of getting me away from what I thought. Do you guys think there's any chance he could be the lead back maybe by week 4, by the first month of the season, end of the first month?
I mean, there's precedent. Like you look at Antonio Gibson, he was pretty much, kind of seldom used as like a gadget player in Memphis, and now he's the lead back for Washington. So, it's possible.
I mean, with Rex Burkhead and Marlon Mack ahead of you, it's definitely not like a daunting task for him to be able to get to the top of the depth chart there.
Talent-wise, he should be at the top. But like I said, I wonder if they're kind of kicking the tires on this year, accepting that they'll have a low draft pick in addition to the Browns pick, especially if Deshaun Watson doesn't play. And
we say that about teams, but I never actually see teams do that.
Yeah.
I feel like a team is tanking when you hire Lovie Smith as a head coach at this point.
I mean, they also, I think, want to see what they have in Davis Mills too.
Davis Mills is a beast. I think he's got potential to be a franchise cornerstone.
He's a great QB2 target for people that are in super flex leagues. He's a really undervalued QB2 target right now. So definitely look at him in those leagues, especially. Johnny, let's talk about the Tennessee Titans. And they're undergoing a lot of turnover now with losing A.J. Brown and bringing in a new number 1 wide receiver per se here. Why don't you tell us about their rookie draft class?
Yeah, I mean, you brought it up, Trey Berks. I was extremely high on him when he got drafted because it just seemed like a perfect fit. He could just seamlessly fit into A.J. Brown's role physically. But as of late, I'm a little worried about him. He's not had the best camp. He's missed 2 weeks because of asthma, which was news to me. Maybe it's not news to the Titans. I'm sure they did their due diligence, but it's a little bit worrying. And now there's talk that he's not even going to be wide receiver 2 on the team. So I really think at this point, overall for this season, he's really likely to be more of a flex play than, someone who you slot in as your wide receiver 1 or 2 every week. But that can change at the end of the year as he gets more comfortable and, maybe the seasons change and his asthma is less impactful as it gets, less pollen, less hot and stuff like that. I mean, that's something that came out of nowhere. That came out of nowhere.
Wait, did you see somebody quote tweeted, and I wish I could give them credit, that report about Trey Berks, the same thing came out like 3 years ago about A.J. Brown, that he was going to be third string wide receiver.
And that's the flip side too, because I mean we all remember the Justin Jefferson is dropping everything and
that was Jamar Chase, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Or Jamar Chase, yeah. Jamar Chase. We all remember that. So it is, off-season talk, but the fact that he's missed 2 weeks from a health issue is worrying from the health issue perspective and the not getting reps with Ryan Tannehill perspective.
You do have to play to get better. I think that's a fair thing. At least, with Jamar Chase, he was playing.
That's right.
Exactly.
And as you see reports coming out like Austin Hooper today is becoming a favorite target of Ryan Tannehill, which it's like, hey, if he's getting acclimated to other guys and he's starting to trust them, that's definitely going to hurt Treylon Burks there. But a lot more time in the offseason to be able to examine what his impact could be. As far as the Colts go, there's a couple players that intrigue me with the Colts. The one that most people are going to be talking about is going to be Alec Pierce, who was the wide receiver out of Cincinnati, taking the pick before Sky Moore. Luckily, I was very happy that Sky Moore fell one more pick here.
But I wish I was on last week so I could go off on Sky Moore.
You missed it. Fantastic. But Alec Pierce definitely fits in a position of need. The Colts were going into the season with pretty much Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell as their 1 and 2. So he can step in right now as the number 2 wide receiver opposite Michael Pittman. Pierce is 6'3", so he's going to be a great red zone target. People kind of compare him to Jordy Nelson. I think more the fact that they're not just both white receivers, but they're both big guys that are red zone targets and make good sideline grabs.
Jordy Nelson wasn't big.
I think they were both around like 6'2", 6'3". I'll have to look that up. But he had 52 catches, 884 yards, and 8 touchdowns last season. And to be able to say he's going to step in as the number 2 of this offense pretty quickly, in an offense with like the Colts that are going to be able to set up a lot of great things off of play action, I'm intrigued with Alec Pierce. And I think he could be a really good guy you could get probably towards the end of your fantasy drafts and could end up being like a low-end flex play, I think, for like a 12-team league this year in redraft. Obviously in Dynasty, he's going to be a top 2-round pick. But Alec Pierce, are you guys as impressed with what I've seen from him? He makes a lot of athletic catches. Seems like he's going to get a lot of volume in his first season.
Clearly not. He's so good. He's made you think Jordy Nelson was really good.
Jordy Nelson was really good. Although, wait, how tall do you think Jordy Nelson is?
I looked it up. He's 6'3". I
was right. Yes, he's 6'3". Yeah. Same height. Oh, goodness. You got to just listen to me on the first time. I'm always right with that. But yeah, I think he'll be a great guy for the Colts this year. Let's talk about the actual just regular fantasy relevant players that aren't rookies on each team. Going back to the Jacksonville Jaguars, Brad, you made a video earlier this offseason on some Jags franchise pieces and what your thoughts were them going forward. What do you think about the fantasy relevant guys on this team?
Yeah, I was really impressed they added a lot of speed. I think that's a good idea for their young quarterback. I'll start a wide receiver with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. They're both listed as starting wide receivers along with Marvin Jones, and I think that's how things will play out. Christian Kirk, at 25 years old, signed a huge deal, $37 million guaranteed, $18 million a year. He's known for his speed. He runs a sub 4.5 and had just under 1,000 yards last year with Kyler Murray as the 3rd and maybe 4th target. And now he's going to be the 1st or 2nd with Trevor Lawrence, who's undoubtedly going to be much better with an improved O-line and improved weapons. Kirk's projected as the wide receiver 45 this year, and I think that may be low. It's just above Garrett Wilson and Russell Gage in Tampa. I don't think he'll win you a league, but he's somebody you can expect to have, a solid floor each and every week. Zay Jones, he's currently wide receiver 99. I think that's super low. That's great value. Johnny can attest to Zay's potential. He was over there at Oakland for a long time. He's also a sub 4.5 guy. huge catch radius, elite agility, burst. He's 6'2". He makes very tough catches. He was a second-round draft pick. He had the second best season of his career last year with Derek Carr. His numbers weren't eye-popping. He only had 550 yards and a touchdown, but it was the 70 targets that caught my eye. I think we can expect an increased target share and volume for Jones this year, as he's going to be their, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and possibly something closest to like his second year in the league when he had 102 targets and 7 touchdowns. So I think wide receiver 99 is really low for him. And then the last of the free agents I want to touch on is Evan Ingram. He's an athletic freak. I expect him to break out every single year, and it just doesn't happen. Usually due to injuries. He ran a 4.42 40 in college, which was obviously 100th percentile in his position. He was 91st percentile in agility, 93rd in strength. He went in the first round of the draft, but he really hasn't had the magical year that his profile says he could. His rookie year was his best year. Since then, he hasn't had more than 75 targets. Only once he did in 2020 with 109, but he's just been a guy that he's got all the talent and he just never breaks out. He's currently ranked at TE24 with an ADP of 170, and I think that is perfect. Like, if I can get him in the last round of the draft or in the waiver wire even, I'm going to be ecstatic to have him as my backup tight end. The only other 2 assets I haven't touched on, Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne. Trevor Lawrence is the QB 19, which I think is low, but it's probably about right. I don't really know what to expect from Trevor Lawrence this year. I know he's going to be a lot better. He's got a better line. He's got better weapons, a lot of speed. Doesn't have to deal with Urban Meyer. I think we're going to have a lot of good things to look for out of Trevor Lawrence just from his college career. And I think his second year is going to be better as he learned a lot from his failures last year. And then Travis Etienne, I'm incredibly high on him. I think he's got potential upside to RB1, but I think he's definitely going to be an RB2 this year. I'm not going to go into depth for him because I've got a video coming out later that we can plug. But I definitely like what the Jags are doing. I think they're going to be really improved. I saw Dominique Foxworthy on ESPN say that if he had to guess this year's Cincinnati Bengals, he would guess the Jags. Like, of any bad team to go turn around and make the Super Bowl, it will be the Jags. And I think that's pretty spot on. I don't think it'll happen, obviously, but the Jags got a lot better this year.
They don't also have Urban Meyer there, which is a big deal. They'll be able to actually get better and be able to have an effective offensive system.
They'll just be grinded on the field instead of at the bar.
Exactly. I like ETN too, and I'm going to save all the talk for your video because, again, I'm sure I'll have everything I'm going to say about him. But yeah, the Jags look like they're a team on the rise here, and Christian Kirk, I think, like you said, Brad's a little undervalued right now, and I think should be a day 1 flex play with probably the amount of targets he's going to get.
Absolutely.
Eric, let's talk about the Texans and their skill players, including one of probably the most underappreciated guys in fantasy, if not number 1 in Brandon Cooks, but the rest of the Texans as well.
I feel like that's the first time you've called me Eric on this show instead of Doc or another name.
Doc, go ahead.
Yeah, getting the running backs out of the way. Marlon Mack went 28 for 101 last year. You're not starting him. You're probably not drafting him unless it's a late round pick. Same with Rex Burkhead. I don't think the running back position is very valuable for the Texans outside super deep leagues. But I will start with Davis Mills, and you'd mentioned a great QB2 and someone that you're looking to target in Superflex. So I looked this up. He's the only rookie QB to pass for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in a game against the Bill Belichick defense. And think about, he's played some really good rookie QBs. He shut out Justin Herbert his rookie season. Russell Wilson threw for 300 yards, which was the only other guy to, but not 3 touchdowns. So I think that shows the upside that he has. I know it's just one game. It's 16 touchdowns, 10 interceptions for the season. But if you take out that awful game against Buffalo where he went 11 for 21 with 4 interceptions at the Bills, it's actually pretty decent. Only 1 multi-interception game, 5 multi-touchdown games, 3 games with a QBR above 70. And the last 4 games of the season, the Texans put up 30, 41, 7, and 25. I do think that they'll be slightly better, but they'll probably be playing from behind most games, which is a favorable game script for Davis Mills. So I like him as a late round target. And David, you're right. Brandon Cooks is underappreciated, but this feels like the year that he's getting appreciated, probably the right amount. So on Fantasy Pros, he's wide receiver 22 at ADP 57. And if we look at his 2021 season, he was 13th in targets, and he did miss a game. And he has 1,000+ yards in 6 out of his 7 seasons since his rookie year. But I'm a little bit trepidatious this year for a couple of reasons.
Nice
One,
word.
Trepidatious.
There
Get
we
Eric to
go.
the spelling bee right now.
Yeah, there we go. He's had 5 documented concussions in his career. Those are documented ones. So if he does get a concussion, which in football you can say probably happens more than any sport, I think that's a multi-game absence right there. And you don't, I mean, John was talking about the injury risk. I don't like baking that into ADP. And you just worry about, once again, if something like that does happen, he takes a hit, or even if the concussion isn't documented and he starts having symptoms, they're probably going to be pretty cautious with him. So that's my first fear. And the second is the touchdowns are going to be capped. He's never had double-digit touchdowns in his career. The highest he's had is 9 once. Most of the time he floats in that 5 to 6 range. And his touchdown distance last year, he had 6 of them: 8, 22, 43, 40, 45, and 2. So I think of it like you could say, yes, he has that explosive upside, but I think that's very tough to predict year to year. And him being 5'10", I don't think he's going to be that red zone target that you expect other low-end wide receiver 1s, high-end wide receiver 2s to be, which is what he's rated at this year.
A couple things. The first, the running back position, Alec Pierce, I think is very much worth a pick in any league that you're in, just because he could be the number 1 running back for this
Agreed.
team. So I do think he's worth definitely a late dart throw in any league that you're in that's redraft. As far as Brandon Cooks goes, let me throw out some names, and you guys tell me who you would rather draft: Brandon Cooks or Terry McLaurin.
Is McLaurin on the Commanders?
Yes.
Cooks.
McLaurin.
Brandon Cooks or DK Metcalf?
Metcalf.
Probably Metcalf, yeah.
What about Brandon Cooks or Amari Cooper?
With all Watson's going to have to deal with, definitely Cooks.
So those are the receivers that are ranked right around him. He's wide receiver 17 on, according to Fantasy Pros ECR, which is expert consensus rankings. And the 3 I just read were the ones that go right after him. So I do think he's kind of fairly valued here. I just think like he in fantasy drafts, a lot of times people don't talk about him, or maybe he gets bumped down a couple rounds, and maybe the concussion stuff is what are in people's minds, Doc, or maybe just other people see that he plays for the Texans and they're just don't think there's much there.
Doc, who are the other wide receivers on the roster? The other two?
There's Nico Collins,
big second-year receiver. I think is gonna do well this year.
John Mechie, Philip Dorsett, Chris Conley, Chris Moore.
Is Mechie gonna be ready?
They said there's a chance that he starts the year on the PUP list,
Okay.
But they haven't confirmed yet.
And
so it's really going to be like Cooks is the only name. I saw Collins came on late last year, but in terms of like consistency, Cooks is the only guy.
I mean, Collins had 33 for 446 and 1 touchdown. And by the way, the talent is there for Brandon Cooks. It's more of the concussions that are really scaring me away. Like
Eric, I'm scared of injuries, Mendelson.
But that is a fair injury to be scared of, because all it takes is one and then you're shut down.
And I'm not trying to say I'm victory lap when someone gets injured, but it's like it's something that you have to think about, like especially in a physical sport like football. You can't just bypass that.
I have a lot of data on Nico Collins because I just published an article on Fantasy Pros about him, but just because of time purposes, we're gonna move on to the Tennessee Titans and all their players, Johnny. Again, it's some of the same and then some different. So who should we talk about?
Yeah, I mean, Henry, you're either going to be with him or you're going to be scared of his injury from last season. I personally think he hasn't shown himself to be injury prone. This is sort of it's almost better form, rest his body a little bit situation. But I think he's going to put up Derrick Henry numbers. Robert Woods, he's also coming off an injury, ironically. But I do think he's going to get a lot of targets just by necessity. It's really just him and Austin Hooper, who also figures to get a lot of targets because outside of Hooper, Woods, and Berks, it's really a grab bag of like, wait, who's that kind of receivers in Tennessee? And I think that leads to, a big three with Berks really is a big question mark, depending on the rapport you can get with Tannehill, who I think is going to have a terrible year this year. I mean, he's lost his best target. His new best target is coming off an ACL injury. His new receiver to him, Austin Hooper, new receiver to him, Trey Berks, new receiver to him, who can't seem to get to practice. He came off his worst season last year since he was a Dolphin, and that's really not something you want to hear if you want to buy into Tannehill.
Let me ask you guys, is Robert Woods a value at wide receiver 43 off the board?
So.
Not
43, yeah.
But
he's just going to be the only guy.
It's Berks 41, Robert Woods 43. You could have the number one receiver for the Titans, which again, maybe it's not sexy, but he could be a really good flex option for you with the amount of target volume he could get on this.
Eric will tell you he gets one or two end arounds.
Yeah.
My thing with Robert Woods is like, I think of him as a downfield threat, and Tannehill is not a downfield quarterback. So I just don't know. Like, I know he's the best receiver on the roster, but I don't know that he's going to have the route tree that's going to benefit him for fantasy football.
Do you guys like Treylon Burks at 41 or Robert Woods at 43 better?
Woods for sure.
Woods.
It's Burks for me.
So 2-1. I think if Burks, if as long as there's no injury questions, I think I would go Burks.
Let me ask you this, Johnny. What week do we see Malik Willis?
If at all. We don't. I don't think you do. Yeah, but on the back of Derrick Henry, they're going to be competing for a playoff spot for the entire season, and unless they get out of playoff contention, there's no reason to put Willis in. It doesn't seem like they truly.
He's got the extra element of he can run.
He may be in gadget plays, but he's not going to be the starter until next year, or they're out of contention.
One of my favorite bets is the Titans to miss playoffs at plus money.
Oh, if we had a betting show, that would be one that could get thrown in there. But Doc's throwing those tidbits out for you guys that are listening in our DGens. So you can add that into to your potential bets for this year. As far as the Colts go, you had Matt Ryan, who was QB 20 last year. Still, good 67% completion percentage, almost 4,000 yards. Was sacked 40 times, which was one of the tops in the NFL, 20 touchdown passes. I do think we could see a resurgence this year because he actually has some decent weapons on this team. Jonathan Taylor is going to demand so much attention in the run game that I think Matt Ryan is going to be able to have easier time getting the ball downfield with, the defense being sucked in, but also the offensive line of the Colts is a big upgrade from the offensive line in Atlanta. And I think Matt Ryan is actually, when he give him time, I think he's actually still a very good quarterback compared to what I think a lot of people think of him. So I would not be shocked to see him be like the QB 11 or QB 12 this year, as his ceiling, I think. And I think many people are valuing him as like a kind of a mid to low end QB 2. So I do think Matt Ryan is a sneaky QB 2 option for you this year. And if Carson Wentz can have great weeks, then so can Matt Ryan. So I do like him. Jonathan Taylor, do we need to talk about Jonathan Taylor? Does anybody have him not as the RB1 this year?
I have Derrick Henry RB1.
I have injury concerns because of the amount of carries he takes. I'm kidding.
Christian McCaffrey, I think, they are scared off of him because of the injuries. Derrick Henry, people maybe he's coming back from the injury and they don't know what it is. We'll talk about our running back rankings on a future show.
What about Austin Eckler, David?
He's a top 5.
Yeah, you gotta pump up your guy.
I'll do it at the end of the show. But I think he's still my RB1 for right now, just with the volume he's going to get. I do think Nyheim Hines eats into his passing game work a little bit more this year. He's going to be, I think, a kind of a pest to anybody that rosters Jonathan Taylor. So he'll have his 3 or 4 great games where you wish you rostered him in DFS, but I think Taylor should be a bell cow. Otherwise, at the wide receiver position, Michael Pittman, I think this is the year he breaks out as a legitimate breakout in year 3. He's an alpha wide receiver, I think, as much as you can have one on a team. Right now, he was third in routes run per dropback at 96%. That's only behind Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase last year. Fourth in contested catches, eighth in target share from weeks 13 through 18 at 31%. So you saw how much they were kind of trying to get him the ball at the end of the year. He had 88 catches for over 1,000 yards last year. Overall in the season, over 25% target percentage. But what I really am kind of intrigued on here is the Colts ranked 29th in pass play rate and 27th in pass attempts last year. I do think part of that was because they had Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
And I think with Matt Ryan there, they're going to actually – what'd you say?
A lot of that was because they had Carson Wentz.
Yes. And now he plays for Brad.
Future division winner Carson Wentz.
That's right.
That division.
I mean, if you saw the numbers he had, and that's them basically almost last in all those passing categories, that pretty much can only go up at this point. So I think there's another level to Michael Pittman that we haven't seen yet. And I think he has a chance to be a top 12 wide receiver this year. Like, I legit think he could be a back end wide receiver 1, and I would not be shocked. And as far as we talked about Alec Pierce as the potential number 2, I think he's the only other wide receiver I would consider. And then the tight end I didn't touch on, which I meant to touch on in the rookie talk, is Jelani Woods, who is basically going to be stepping into the Jack Doyle thing because you have Mo Alley Cox, I think, is going to stay in the Mo Alley Cox role. Jelani Woods could be the best tight end on this team by the end of the year. He's a very sneaky player. They drafted him, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, into the 3rd round. Yeah, he was the 3rd round pick, number 73 overall. He's 6'7". So he's a big target, just like Mo Alley Cox is. And I do think he's somebody that I think is more talented than Mo Alley Cox. And he could be someone I wouldn't be shocked to see him catch like 8 touchdowns this year and be like a top, 15 tight end just because of how many touchdowns he gets in the red zone. So those would be the players on the Colts I would look at. And
happy trails to Gronk, by the way, retired today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do we think he comes back?
Yes.
Maybe next year.
I think
saw
he comes
Tom Brady
back
already.
Week 11, week 12.
Tom Brady already put a picture of him, like of a guy holding a phone calling somebody. So I think if the Bucks are like close to the postseason, I think he'll come back. So
yeah,
it
took him a while to get into shape last year, though.
It did. Maybe at the very least he's just a red zone target, like they use him in like red zone packages or something.
But I bet he's like his body's got to be really hurting. He's always been dinged up.
I'm not mistaken. I think he's about the same age as Kelsey.
He is, but he's way more hurt.
Yeah, because he's played in so many more games.
Yeah.
But guys, anything else you want to plug here?
People forget that like Patriots players who are on those teams get like extra seasons worth of games just from the playoffs. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about it, you could potentially play in 4 more games, which is a quarter of an NFL season.
Yeah.
So it's a lot, especially year after year. Guys, anything you guys want to plug? We're kind of getting ready to wrap up here. I think we covered the AFC South pretty well. We hit all of these gentlemen and their teams here. So let's go ahead and go around. Anything you want to plug before we close out shop here?
The same thing I plug every night, the Power Hour, but go on to Brad.
Definitely watch those Power Hours. Watch our movie minutes as well. You can catch me doing articles for NBA and NFL on Fantrax HQ. And I'm also dropping videos on our YouTube channel as well, Triple Play Fantasy YouTube channel. Make sure to check that out.
For sure. Always great content. And the music you play during every video always gets me really pumped up. I don't know what song it is, but every time
it's called royalty-free music, buddy.
It's the same song every time, though.
Every time.
So I love it. Doc, what about you?
Nah, man. I don't have anything. Go ahead and you plug.
Check Twitter, obviously, DMendio2. Obviously doing this every week, the baseball show every week, and the call-up, the minor league baseball show, 3 podcasts a week from me. And then tune in this Thursday. I don't know if it'll be live or not yet. We're going to figure that out. But at some point this week, you will see me chatting with Austin Eckler coming back onto the podcast. And we're going to talk a little bit about last season, fantasy football.
You guys going to do a pull-up competition?
I have to get a pull-up bar in my house.
It's going to be self-involved, Johnny.
I'm gonna have to do something. We'll have to figure it out. But for Johnny, for Brad, for Doc, I'm D Mendy. We're gonna make like a bread truck and we're gonna haul these buns. Catch you guys next week.